Okay, the question is, how do I give my kids a work ethic? And this is part one of an answer that I will need 2 days to give. So check in tomorrow for part two. So how do I give my kids a work ethic? There's a really important, ironic reality to my answer on this. All kids have a work ethic. All children have a work ethic. The problem is that some kids have an ethical standard that is backward and wrong and immoral, and they never develop a moral work ethic. So they've got this really corrupt one. When our children were small, my wife had a friend who dropped in often to visit. Let's call her Mama Leone. I'll refer to her several times. One day, Mama Leone said, to my wife, she said, you are so lucky that your kids like to work and help around the house. My kids hate work. They won't lift a finger to do anything, and so I have to do everything. And so what was actually going on in that friend's house? The children were being taught by Mama Leone's parental negligence the wrong things about work and ethics and the future and obedience and personal happiness. They were being taught that you can grow up and have someone else do all the work, that you didn't have to do anything you don't want to do, that you can actually grow up in indulging yourself in laziness, immediate gratification, and a really bad attitude toward the very thing that could help you build a life for yourself. That's hard work, which is part of life. But it must be rightly directed hard work. Mama Leona's kids were actually working at being selfish. They were working to defy their mom's authority and assert their own authority. And this really becomes dangerous as children reach age 10 and 15 and 17. And this is because our children can work pretty hard on things that they really want to work on. And this is why they don't want to go to bed at bedtime when they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old, because they're doing important stuff of some kind, of their choosing. And so children they already have a built-in urge to work and be industrious. But what they don't have is a built-in ethical direction for all that energy. And that's what your parenting is for, your good parenting is for, your moral parenting is absolutely necessary for. Without moral parenting, what can happen to children? They can work really hard on really bad things as they get older. For example, some of this is going on right now around our country. Some of them can text their 17-year-old friends and say, hey, a bunch of us are going out tonight to destroy all the small businesses in our community and try to beat last night's record of $1 billion in damage. You want to come? And breaking windows and burning down $1 billion worth of productive free market economy is not easy work. It's hard work, but it's absolutely the wrong kind of work. It's criminal. It's unethical work. And gaming the welfare system can actually be hard intellectual work. It takes focus and intellectual intelligence to try to figure out how to game the system, how to double dip and triple dip, as some people can do. But this is the wrong kind of intellectual work. It's dishonest. So how do we give our kids the right work ethic? That really is the question of the hour because of what we've inherited and what our parents inherited. Over the last few years, businesses in our area have shut down because the owner said dependable help was impossible to find. And I've talked to so many of these businessmen. They have worked really hard to find good help, and they just simply haven't. This is true all over the developed world, which, if you think about it, it only developed into the developed world because people with a work ethic developed it through work into the developed world. And today, the best and most generous employers are failing in business for this tragic reason. They can't locate willing workers who have a work ethic, the right work ethic. Our economy also crashes and burns when we fail to produce citizens with a will to work and a productive attitude and a personal ethic to hold a job and perform a job. The whole economy will crash, bringing down the culture with it. So back to my original answer to your good question. All kids really do have a work ethic of some kind. And all kids actually do want to grow up. This is what I found so interesting as we had children and we watched them. 3-year-olds want to be like the adults in the home and push the crumbs around on the floor in the kitchen with a broom like mom and dad are doing. They want to try to work. They do try to work. 5 and 6-year-old boys can build entire little cities in a sandbox. 7 and 8-year-old boys can build fortresses and trees to defend the territory from evil because somehow they know it's out there and they know somebody's got to be the defender of it. And they can really work hard at this, planning and building and defending and coming up with stories about who they are and who the enemy is and how they're fighting them and how they're going to defend the next wave of attack. It's really amazing how vigorous their minds can be and how vigorous their bodies can be when they do these things that they want to do. And then what happens? Well, in my generation and then the millennial generation coming along after, modern adults went to work on these children to force them backward into infantilism. The American post-war culture was just horrible at this. It's been the most guilty of this. It still is. The parents and the school teachers and the media darlings of the boomers and the millennials have been working hard. This is the irony. They have been working hard themselves to keep children in perpetual immaturity and a kind of adolescence. And so now what do we got? The snowflake culture. And the culture of the last 2 years is one really ugly result of this, and it just gets worse. It seems it gets worse every week. The cancel culture is another result of this. We've got 20-year-old infants throwing tantrums in trying to cancel the adult world, the world of responsibility and moral law. And why? Why are they doing this? It's just because the kids of the 50s and the 60s, 70s, and 80s never developed a mature appreciation for basic responsibility. They never fully grew up. Yes, there are productive workplaces and companies out there, but workers seem to have to be bribed and cajoled and manipulated to put in a productive day of work. I'll mention some above average businesses tomorrow and people, but let's be honest about the average business. There's just barely enough professional conduct to keep the business going so that there's enough money to pay the employees every Friday. And our exploding welfare culture is a constant temptation to these employees to just simply quit and abandon the free market economy altogether so that they can receive all this fictional money. And they listen to this fictional economic lesson that's being circulated in my county, and it's probably in yours, by many parents who know better, but they're still working hard to teach a false view of the totally wrong morality. Here's what they're telling their children. You don't need a work ethic because you don't need to work. These parents are telling their children to just chill out, avoid work, don't study, don't do your homework, just drop out of school, smoke weed, hang out with your friends, because the welfare lifestyle is available to everybody for life. And the teachers here in my county, when I speak to them and talk to them, they tell me that 50 to 70% of their students' parents are living on welfare and telling their kids to aspire to the same defeated, dead-end lifestyle. That's what they're telling them. They're not saying you should try to get out of this. They're saying, don't be stupid and work. Just, get on the system like we are and get your check every week. Now, the teachers also tell me it's the white parents who are pushing this lifestyle, just because they want it to be clear that I know that. And so why work, these parents say, when the government pays you even more to live a life of leisure? Why live a slave-like existence in some sort of slave-like job when the government says you're entitled to an easy life of dependency with never-ending entitlement payments? And so many of these kids grow up thinking what about work? That basically what they absorb from all this is that there are only two options in life: living a slave-like existence, working in some business, which they're told is a capitalistic sort of an evil thing, or the other option is living a slave-like welfare existence on the government's plantation of dependency. They don't know how to think about freedom. They don't know how to imagine freedom. They don't know how to work to keep freedom alive. They don't understand our founders who fought and sacrificed for freedom. And so they're going through life now. I mean, these kids and their parents with a slave mentality. And I know this is not what you want for your children, which is why you asked me the question, how do I give my children a work ethic? And you seem to understand that people who have a work ethic have exactly what it takes to achieve both freedom and a better way of life. And you're absolutely right about that. They have what it takes to make history by building a civilization with real compounding wealth. But we've got to pause here with some trigger warnings. You're obviously guilty, by just asking me the question that you did, of wanting several things which are now really politically incorrect desires. Wanting a productive, advancing civilization is now forbidden thought. You're not supposed to want that. You're not supposed to talk about that. Having a work ethic or teaching your kids a work ethic can get you labeled racist. Now, just so you know, the Smithsonian Institution runs a small government-funded museum called the National Museum of African American History and Culture. In shockingly racist published materials, it claims that America's so-called systemic racism, first of all, it claims that that does exist and it's out there, and then they try to explain it. They say it comes from a culture of whiteness. I mean, literally, that's the word that they use. And then they say this culture of whiteness includes really bad things like a Protestant work ethic, the nuclear family, and hard work is the key to success. It is suggested in their materials that work before play is one of those cultural elements which contributed to America's systemic racism. And so I'd like to ask the question, is this literature published by the government possibly inciting hatred in violation of YouTube standards? The museum's channel is still up on YouTube as I record this. What does their literature say and infer about persons of a certain color or certain religion? What is it saying? What does it mean? And so in terms of historical integrity, I have to say, the materials fail. The authors fail. They understand neither history nor culture. The drive to live a better life, to build communities where civility replaces brutality, where freedom replaces a slave culture, to achieve a life of economic freedom and social freedom. None of these are dangerous racist concepts. None of them. None of these customs are responsible for systemic racism. None of these human urges for freedom and financial independence belong to one so-called race. And culture should never be, as they do in their materials, should never be described in terms of color or color supremacy. People should never be judged in terms of color. And yet, our government is now so politically confused, it is attributing evil to several of history's best cultural institutions and achievements. The work ethic, let's just nail this down. It is not a destructive racist invention. Let me repeat this. The work ethic is not and never has been a destructive racist invention. And I'd like to prove this with a story about some people I've met who happen to have very dark skin. They live in the slum of Kibera on the outskirts of Nairobi in Kenya. It's one of the largest, poorest, and blackest communities on earth. And when I visited the people who live there, I found some of the most dignified representations of a work ethic I've ever seen anywhere in any country. Many of the 2 million who live crowded into this swamp of human waste have come here on purpose from regions of war, places of famine, primitive slave societies, and they view Kibera as a temporary stop on their way to freedom and a better life. They simply need a cheap place to sleep at night while they get a new life, while they learn to acclimate themselves to urban life. And so for now, this is home for them. They're only staying until their work ethic can carry them forward into better homes. And so every day they work, they do go to work, they earn money, they save money, they educate themselves. They earn good work reputations, they earn promotions so that they can move out of the slum and into an apartment in a modern city, which is their next temporary waypoint to something even higher and better than an apartment. And as I look there and I visit there and I walk the streets of Kibera or the little alleys, I still don't know how they do it, or how anyone can live in Kibera and not be dying of typhus or dysentery or cholera. The slum has never had utilities, only mud huts with these little iron roofs. There are no windows, there are little low doorways, which might be covered with a piece of canvas or an old rug, where they just might even just be open. There's no electricity. In some places, bare wires attempt to steal current from power lines nearby. There's no running water. And the only sewers are the streets and the alleys, which become little rivers of human waste when it does rain. And so when I was there, I saw thousands of people with a solid work ethic doing something every morning that seemed really impossible. Without clean water, without kitchens or bathrooms, without washing machines or refrigerators, these determined workers got themselves ready for work, and then they went to work. They don't merely look clean, they are clean. Their clothes are fresh and spotless and well-fitting. Every morning their clothes were clean and spotless. Very early, they begin the walk of several miles to work in the city. And what impressed me the most of all, as I watched them head into the city, and then as I watched them return at evening, they seemed calm and optimistic and happy and hopeful about life. They had work. This work was their path to freedom and a better life. And so to all the excruciatingly correct American internet censors who are watching this, let me just say this. Those people who use your platforms to discuss these things, to discuss freedom and better lives and the powers of a work ethic, are not systemic racists. The people who write to me are not systemic racists. The people who want answers, they're not racists. Most of them are loving parents who don't want their children to become starving or whining dependents. I have people writing to me whose race I have no clue about. I do know there are black families who are writing to me and communicating with me, and I with them. Now, if they want their children to achieve independence and financial stability, this is not a drive for any kind of supremacy over others. This is not a trait owned by people with any particular color of skin. Now, tomorrow, in part 2, what I'm going to try to do is to discuss some of the more practical things parents can do to inspire a moral work ethic in their young children and build it into their character.